Welcome back, everyone, and this is the Late Stage Podcast, and I'm your host, Sinan Schwarting, live from an unseasonably warm New York City, with our fifth episode, which is just full of interesting news, as usual. Once again, we have a great interview this week. I've sort of already alluded to it in previous episodes, so stay tuned for that. We've got Deniz Opal, who's here to talk about the recent problems with migrant crossings into England and the correlation between that and Brexit, which is apparently fairly clear once you get to understand the trappings of the story. So we'll be back with that, of course. But before then, I guess, let me do my little table of content. I'm going to try to be quick about things this episode. You know, our episodes have been dragging on quite long. And so, in the name of keeping things relatively short, or at least more, bite-sized, if you will, so, folks can consume these episodes in one sitting. I'm going to try to make an effort to sort of abbreviate things a little bit. But so let's see how I do. First of all, I'll do my table of contents. I'll give you guys a bit of a preview of what is to come. I'm going to talk a little bit about Africa today. Briefly, we're going to talk about the red lists, the travel red lists for folks who are allowed out of Africa into various countries. The UK has news on that front. We're going to talk about Uganda. In the spirit of a season of strikes, we've been focusing a lot in our press, or on the left's press, on strikes here in the United States. I've got some news out of Uganda. We're going to talk about Latin America and specifically El Salvador, but kind of how that ties into things in the United States with Kamala Harris and the job she's doing, supposedly in her outreach to Central America regarding the supposed immigration crisis. Then we're going to talk a little bit about, this week, folks, Asia. We're going to talk about Afghanistan, briefly. They're on the brink of mass starvation, and why that is. It's not at all a rush to get soldiers back in or anything like that. And then quickly, we're going to talk a little bit about Saudi Arabia, who has made a surprising cut to their defense budget. And then we'll talk about North America and our opposite reaction to the times that we're living in regarding the defense budget. And then Canada, with a bold move banning conversion therapy, which, kind of congrats to them, I guess. That's the bulk of the story right there. And then, of course, we're going to talk about Europe, which, as I said, I have a guest coming in to talk about England and Brexit and this sort of migration crisis. And then I'm going to very quickly talk about Finland and sort of, for a little levity, if you will, about their situation with their prime minister going out a bit late, having a bit of fun, and how that's been received in the press. But so, without any further ado, let's dig in to the news. So first of all, as I said, we're going to talk briefly about these news stories, or as brief as I can, in an attempt to shorten episode. So first of all, in Africa, there's talk of a red list, right? Folks are not allowed to come to the United States, many European countries, the UK, because of the Omicron variant, right? And this is a known problem. It's supposedly sort of focused around South Africa, but that travel list sort of expanded to a number of countries around there as well. And what's sort of important to note is that the UK has taken all 11 countries off of the travel list, the red list, allowing them to come to the UK under and the premise for it's not so great, although the logic sort of works, obviously. It's that the Omicron virus is so widespread now that the travel ban doesn't really serve any purpose any longer. So obviously the bad news is that Omicron is now out out and about, prevalent. But on the other hand, that sort of selective application of travel bans and whatnot is finally being curtailed. I think, generally speaking, the problem with travel bans is that unless there's some sort of universal like isolation of a country, people are going to travel to other places and then get in somewhere via another country, right? So travel bans are fairly ineffective based on their premise, in that they're fairly easy to dodge if one really has the inclination to. So good riddance to that. Although, sadly, we cannot say good riddance to the Omicron variant yet. I will quickly allude to a last episode and back up. I said that early data suggested that the virus spread more easily but was less virulent. That has maintained so far, although, of course, still there's not a ton of data in. So stay tuned for news on that. And of course, the problem is that with so many people not even vaccinated in the first place, even though it's less violent, it's still going to kill a ton of people. So you still got to do your best to not get it, at the very least to avoid spreading it if you are vaccinated and whatever that might entail. So coronavirus, still in the news. Meanwhile, I mentioned the sort of season of strikes that's taking place here in the United States, and you've seen it from Caterpillar to Kellogg's, right? There's lots of news of strikes in the United States as the sort of labor movement gears up for a push. In Uganda, medical workers there have been asking for a pay hike for quite a bit of time, and obviously in the midst of the coronavirus, the pressure on them, the amount of work they have to do, the rigor of that work, right, how much it's taking out of them, has increased. So it's natural folks would probably, especially if they're already getting paid not enough in the first place, would want more. Unfortunately, the whole nation has decreed that they are to leave their posts within the week. That they're not going to tolerate any sort of disruption or strike or sort of workers' movement of any sort. So, bad news on that front. Solidarity, right, to the folks in Uganda, just as we extend it to the folks here who are fighting for their cause. Don't buy Kellogg's, right? That's another, I guess there's a little addendum there locally. Moving on to Central and South America. And in this case, we're sticking with Central America this week. Nayib Bukele is the president there, who I mentioned before, is kind of a sign of the times that he won. Kind of the candidate that the United States was not supporting of after years of intervention in the nation. So sort of hailed as a win for the left by many. And things have sort of turned, although not exactly the way you'd expect. First of all, Kamala Harris was tasked recently with trying to find the root causes of this sort of quote unquote immigration crisis, meaning, all the immigrants coming towards the southern border and all that. Whether you consider it a crisis or not, I'm not one of those folks personally, is a whole other story. But what we can certainly say is that Kamala Harris was tasked with this, and specifically she was supposed to look into El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala to try to look towards finding the root causes of this, why people needed to leave where they were from to come to the United States in the first place, which in and of itself, is a better response to dealing with immigration than just banning people outright or trying to sort of prevent them from coming in, right? You want to sort of understand what economic problems are spurring that movement in the first place. Okay. The problem is that they've got a very open and transparent president over there in El Salvador by the name of Nayib Bukele, and he's come onto social media saying directly he's not been in touch with Kamala Harris at all. She's made no effort to communicate with him or his country. Prior to this, the most sort of newsworthy story coming out of his presidency was that he was looking towards cryptocurrency as the nation's currency. And as he struggled with that, he's become increasingly vocal in his opposition to the United States and their efforts to intervene in his affairs. And he has, in many cases, pointed to the desire for folks in the United States to be to keep the dollar as the global currency as a reason why they'd want to interfere in his movements. Now, the problem with this is that moving towards cryptocurrency is not necessarily inconsistent with what he claimed the US wants. Cryptocurrency as it exists today is broken into various currencies, Bitcoin being the more sort of widely traded and popular one. But Tether is a currency that folks typically use the most in terms of trading amongst themselves, because it has low fees and whatever, quicker transaction time, or whatever it is that drives that sort of internal logic. The reason Tether is called Tether is because it is tethered to the dollar, to the US currency. So right now, cryptocurrency is almost inherently tied to the dollar because of the commonality of folks using Tether as a means of transacting, or transactions, right, as a means of trading with cryptocurrency. So, you know, a 5D chess player on the part of the US would probably actually seek to strengthen the use of Tether in order to sort of maintain the relevance of the dollar in this age of sort of change, or whatever cryptocurrency represents to the economic world. But it also kind of underscores how Nayib Bukele is not entirely accurate in what he sees as the sort of issues that the United States government has with his government. And in fact, it's probably more the lack of an alignment with the United States government and kind of the sort of neo-imperialistic tradition the United States has of wanting to maintain that grip on things locally that is probably more pressing for them geopolitically than his wanting to adopt cryptocurrency or the Bitcoin as his currency. So he's probably wrong as far as intentions go. With that said, he is sort of bravely bringing attention to the fact that Kamala Harris has not been in communication with him. That's her job. So, you know, it's a developing story. Him being open and transparent and vocal is sort of an interesting phenomenon, but we'll see how things pan out. Now, he's recently blamed the United States for fomenting protests and marches against him, claiming that the United States is backing a communist plot against him. That strikes me as far-fetched. I don't think the United States has much interest in backing communist plots historically. They've backed a lot of plots, not a lot of communist ones. So we'll see how that pans out. Again, you know, clearly a developing news story. And Bukele's sort of independence and transparency is certainly adding some interesting stories to the news cycle, although we'll see how sort of coherent these outbursts remain. Now, on to Asia, where there is talk of mass starvation in Afghanistan. I think there are folks in the world who will point to the United States' leaving Afghanistan as the sort of sole root cause of this issue. Those folks would be wrong. Or right, but in a very roundabout manner. Now, in the United States media, there's been some talk of it, and that's been exactly the focus, as you might expect, on how we left too soon. In fact, this is a direct cause of sanctions that the United States has applied to Afghanistan, having left, to try to hurt the Taliban. Now, trying to impact a government like the Taliban, who I would never come out in support of, is one thing. But we've talked on this podcast a number of times about the effect of sanctions and how they typically hurt people more than the government in charge of those people. This looks like a very clear indication of that fact. And yeah, for folks who want to alleviate the burden on the folks of Afghanistan, I would suggest you look at your sanctions before you look at your military's need, the need for more military involvement, because there are other ways of quote unquote intervening beyond military action and economic sanctions. You could win over hearts and minds via various techniques and tactics that don't necessarily involve helping the Taliban or supporting them. And for all the billions of dollars put into our defense budget, you'd think there would be some understanding of this by now. And I will talk about the defense budget in a minute. Speaking of defense budgets, while we're on the subject of Asia, or in the region of Asia rather, the Saudi Arabian government has made the sort of bold move of decreasing the nation's defense budget to $46 billion, a 10% decrease. And again, to $46 billion, right? 10% decrease results in a $46 billion budget. Now, let's quickly move over to North America. And I know that feels like we're giving short shrift to that story, but it's because that was intentionally a segue. The United States has just resolved its military budget for 2021. And guess what? $10 billion increase, increasing the United States defense budget to $753.5 billion. Remember, Saudi Arabia's was $46 billion. In fact, the Senate requested $715 billion. They got $705, which sort of inflates up to 753 when you add some other energy bills and defense bills that were sort of mandated into the budget. This is relevant because we're in a political cycle here in the United States. We're fresh out of one where, excuse me for the sound of traffic. That's a gentleman on his on his horn that doesn't have any tact. It's important to note the United States spending budget's increase in relation to the fact that for since 2014, right, since Bernie Sanders entered the sort of public discussion about our sort of general politics, but specifically budgeting and how we can invest money in various social needs around the country. The refrain has been, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Oh, you want to help people with their student loans. How are you going to pay for it? You want to make public schools more affordable. Public schools more affordable, which is already an irony. How are you going to pay for it? You want to make healthcare affordable. How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it is the refrain for conservatives and liberals, centrist Democrats. And yet, I have yet to hear a single, how are you going to pay for the $10 billion increase in the $753 billion defense budget? Not once. So, relevant, I would say. And I'll add a nice little segue, perhaps, from Asia to North America. While we're on North America, it's probably important to talk about Canada. Last week, we put them in a negative spotlight with the talk of residential school. My guest, Matthew William Carter, shouts to you. And this week, I think we got to talk about a positive news story regarding Canada. They have banned conversion therapies. Now, conversion therapy is something that anyone in the United States knows. There are regions where this is banned here as well, but obviously there are many where it's not. Last Vice President Mike Pence famously sort of got his name running conversion therapies or something to that effect. But so, yeah, Canada has twice tried this. They've succeeded now on the, 3 is the magic number as far as, finally succeeding in banning conversion therapy and restoring some sanity in that regard, at least respecting more humans as such, as humans. So anyway, let's move on. Now, finally, in our news cycle this week is Europe. And I bumped them to last because this is where we move on to our interview. And I think I've successfully gotten through our news fairly quickly this week as a little treat. But so yeah, first of all, Finland. Sanna Marin is the Prime Minister of Finland, young lady. She's about my age, honestly, but she went out for a night on the town with her friends, which is fine. It's her social life, right? And you can make the argument, oh, but the president should be more busy. We'll get into that in a moment. She went out on the town. Late breaking news was that she was in contact with someone who was COVID positive. They tried to reach her to tell her this, that she should probably try isolating until she found out her own results. She didn't get the news because she was out till 4 a.m. And so then when she got back, she found out that she had sort of broken her own policy. It was a big sort of furor, if you will. I mean, as far as Finland goes, I don't think they're as furious in their media as folks over here tend to be about just about anything. But yeah, the debate, of course, was should she be out so late? Should she not be more responsible? And certainly, I think regarding answering your phone and isolating when you potentially COVID positive, even she would agree she should have done better in that regard. As far as her private life goes and going out till 4 a.m. and all that, now it's a bit late, no doubt. But I doubt it's a common occurrence. B, in my lifetime, at least 2 presidents have been found out to be in Jeffrey Epstein's black book. So if we're gonna try to throw shade on this prime minister of Finland over her decisions regarding her private life, I think that we should not throw stones from a glass house, to borrow a phrase. We've had presidents apparently doing far more nefarious, shady things in their private life. So if she decides to go with her friends, it doesn't really hurt anyone, unless she reported positive with COVID and she passed it around. But she didn't. So luckily she hurt nobody. She had a good night on the town with her friend and nobody was hurt for it. I'm sure she'll be better about being by her business phone next time. But anyway, that's it from Finland. Now moving on. This story struck me as odd. So first of all, there was talk of lots of crossings, of migrants crossing, the English Channel. In many cases dying, accidents occurring, etc. Which, when you hear stories of migrant crossings, you often hear these stories of folks dying and the tragedies that follow. Although typically you hear these more in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean. The migrants themselves, some are from the Middle East, from Syria, from Libya, from Northern Africa, Ethiopia, right? There's so many civil wars going on in the region where folks could be fleeing from that. That's irrelevant. And that group is the same as the group that were crossing the English Channel. But it struck me as odd to hear stories of these crossings. And it struck me even odder that these were immediately being linked to Brexit. And so, as it turned out, it's a sort of complicated story. There's these Dublin Accords that mandated immigrants' access to the UK, which were essentially disbanded because of Brexit. There are French immigration forces that were sort of more seriously monitoring their border and preventing access to England, which they sort of curtailed as England was less linked to them politically, as Brexit separated them from the EU. There's a border with Northern Ireland, which didn't exist, right? Because Northern Ireland and the UK are one and the same, but because Northern Ireland has different ties to the outside world than the UK, however, that has sort of trickled down, and so they've now had to create a sort of secondary border there. So there's lots of sort of Brexit-linked reasons for why there are more trouble with crossings now than there ever had been previously. But still, this is a weird story that I didn't know much about, and so I needed to get some input on this, and I knew no one better. And anyone who follows me on Twitter likely already follows this guy. His name is Deniz Opal at Selzero. Seltzer? Is it Seltzer? Seltzero? Selzero? Selzero? I don't know. Whatever it is, you can see it down there. Very informed guy. His Twitter profile is a stream of Brexit-related musings and frustrations often, which isn't to say that that's the only thing he's focused on. He's a software developer and a very talented one at that, and successful, actually. And he's got various interests that you can also find on his Twitter feed. So I don't want him to seem like he's obsessed or anything like that, because he's not, but he is very informed. And as such, I had to have him on to talk about this subject. So without any further ado, Deniz Opal. You know, the story in and of itself is not unique. We've heard lots of stories of dangerous crossings, but not in the English Channel, right? Sort of my spidey sense was tingling, because it was like, wait a minute, this doesn't, you know, how are we having this crisis at this stage of the journey? It didn't really make a ton of sense. And so I started digging around, and almost immediately links to Brexit started popping up, various credible news sources tying them together. And immediately I thought, okay, my friend Deniz Opal needs to come on and talk about this. Now, before we dig into the subject matter, Deniz, and we'll talk a little bit at the end about any projects you want to plug or anything like that. But so yeah, Deniz, like, you know, first of all, I mean, sort of, I've from what I've gathered, these are the same groups that are passing away, you know, in the Mediterranean, right? There's Syrians, Libyans, like the immigrants themselves is not a unique group to the sort of European story at large, but the channel itself is. I guess first of all, did I sort of get that story right as far as the issue with the passage?
Yeah. I mean, everything you said is factual, other than we do have channel crossings all the time, and it's not that strange. You know, people swim the channel. It's
I gathered.
Right.
I guess I just assumed that once you were in like Europe, you know, like
right,
you didn't have to resort to those sort of tactics as much. And anyway,
right. So you know, people will say like they're illegal. It's an illegal crossing. It's not an illegal crossing. It's not illegal to get in a dinghy and go from one shore to the other shore. What's illegal is once you get there, if you act illegally, if you don't declare that you're there for whatever reason, right. You know, if you're told to leave and you don't leave, those and then you become an illegal status, etc. But getting in a boat and going from one shore to another shore is not illegal, and that's something that's being painted even by politicians over here. We're being told, you know, day to day, like this is an illegal thing, and you know, people are saying things like from the Home Office, from the government, are saying things like, you know, we should get the Navy involved, we should turn them back, we should. I think that some really weird ideas came out have been kind of leaked. We're not sure if they're real or not. They've been denied as well. Can we make a wave machine?
Oh wow!
So
wow, that's like the wall. Build a wall.
Yes.
Build a machine.
So
build
I mean,
a wave.
this all of this goes back a little bit further. So if you go back to like the 90s, we had a Labour government, and which had its own issues and upsides and downsides, etc. But there was always, in this country, there was always like there was always an anti-EU feeling, okay, and that's kind of a very high echelon thing. That's always the British people that you would imagine in Victorian times. And they go to Eton, and they go to special. And put it this way, I don't know how it matches with your Ivy League levels or anything, but our kids are not going to Eton, okay?
Right.
So you could just put it that way. And all of our
I suppose what the sort of mentality you're speaking to is one of elitism, right? Like, who are we of the British Crown to be told what to do?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we had all these empires. We were the empire that the sun didn't set on. So why should we be in a union with our countries, with 26 other countries, 27 other countries? We should be our own. We should be out there. We should be flying our flag and all of that stuff. That's the mentality. So that always existed. And but actually, we should keep that separate from all of the other things, because what we're living through is where all of these things have become convoluted.
Exactly.
So I mean, there's a balance, right? But
so anyway, so to pull this back to the story of the migrant workers dying in the English Channel. Now, I guess first of all, why is this happening more now? Is it harder for them to enter England because of Brexit? Like,
so this is what's happening. God damn it. Okay, it's so stupid, and Brexit is so stupid, and it's all Brexit, right? Because they voted for Brexit because they didn't want illegal immigrants, they didn't want migrant workers on no wages, they didn't want people of different cultures living here. They wanted British culture.
Right.
So what's happened is, every single thing that they have tried to control with Brexit, that they've tried to gain through Brexit, has gone the other way, and they've lost it. And the reason is that if you want to control a river, you build a canal, okay? If you build a dam to control the river, you better make a really good dam. You better plan that dam really well, because you're going to end up with a mess, okay? Build a canal and you can control it, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't want that. They didn't want to sort of ease the way. They didn't want to sort of stay in some European things. They were just like, no, we don't want anything to do with Europe whatsoever. Get rid of all of the agreements. We don't care. Nothing. We don't want.
Burn it all down.
Burn it down. Okay. We don't want canal. We're building a dam. Get on the other side of the dam. Okay. So what then happened is this. First of all, business is crying out saying, why can't we have more workers? Because we don't have people that can do these jobs. Okay. We don't even have enough people. People say that there's a lot of unemployment in the UK, but they don't understand structural unemployment. They don't understand that unemployment. You can't just tell an unemployed 60-year-old professor of chemistry to drive a truck.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? You have to, that number, when you say there's X million unemployed people, doesn't mean that you have, that it's not SimCity where you can just click and say,
put them into the factory.
Right.
Industry. Throw them into industry.
Or likewise, you can't tell like a 60-year-old truck driver to go be a professor of chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Perhaps even more so.
Right.
Yes.
So anyway, so industry is crying. Even like the really, really pro-Brexit industries are crying. I can't remember his name, the guy in charge of Witherspoons. He was really pro-Brexit. He was putting pro-Brexit beer mats on the tables to get a Brexit vote, and now he's crying for employment. There's a hotel chain called Forte Hotels, and the CEO of Forte Hotels just wrote an article last week in Financial Times saying, this isn't how it was supposed to be. We're supposed to still get people working here, right? And he was very pro-Brexit. So everything that they tried to control, because they took, instead of the canal method, they took the dam method, everything went out of control. And illegal immigration is the one that went out of control the worst, because one thing that they did is, and this isn't actually about Brexit. Actually, Brexit has nothing to do with illegal immigration, to be honest with you. It was just lumped in together. The EU did not increase the number of illegal immigrants in the UK. Did not. There was no such thing. It reduced it. But it was part of the lie to get the vote across, okay? As I said, they kept lying about contradictory promises. And one of them was that we're going to control our borders. We're going to control our borders, right? If you think that controlling your borders by burning down your agreements with your neighboring countries is possible, then your imagination of controlling borders is putting a man with a gun on a wall. That's what you think controlling borders is.
Yeah.
Because if you're not colluding with your neighboring countries, you're not really controlling your borders. And they've just learned this the really hard way. Because what used to happen is France has these camps, and France keeps, and that's really horrible as well. I mean, I think the UK leaving the EU is the stupidest bloody decision I've seen in my life. But that doesn't mean that I'm a fanboy for the EU. I don't have to say that everything they do is awesome. I don't have to say everything the EU or the EU countries or the member states of the EU do is awesome. They do some really horrible things too. Okay, and they should be
Macron
called
is a
out.
bit of a turd lately, even, right? He
Right.
said some weird things.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but they've had these for decades. They've had these immigrant camps on the shore. Okay, and actually, it's kind of like a Cold War between. I know of people that have crossed over from France to the UK, and the way they cross over is this, right? The French authorities find them and they say, "What are you doing?" They say, "I'm trying to get to the UK." They'll put them up in a hotel. They'll pay for their taxi to get in on a ferry and pay for their ferry to get over here.
Get the hell out of here.
That's not our problem anymore. And this was happening. This was actually happening. And I know it because I know people that did it. Okay.
Nice.
I'm not going to pretend it doesn't happen. Okay, it does happen. But in general, the French were keeping refugees, people fleeing from things like Syria and Afghanistan, in these really horrible camps. Not that different from the camps that Trump was keeping those kids in. Right?
Down in the border, yeah.
Right. Worse than those, I would say worse. If you look at the camps in France, I think they're horrible. Okay. But the European Union countries had understandings and agreements between themselves, and they had something called the Dublin Accord, right? An agreement made in Dublin, where the UK, if a refugee from France came over to the UK, and if the UK could argue that that refugee should have sought asylum in France, there's no reason for him to be here. Maybe he doesn't have family here, he doesn't speak the language. Why is he even here? He could have stayed in France. So this is like a sort of an operational error. Let's send him back. And so I think and you saw that video. I know you saw that video because you commented. They were sending hundreds of these people back every year. Okay, in that way, thanks to the Dublin Accord.
Yeah.
So now we're out of the Dublin Accord. And because of that, the UK has only managed to send back 5 people in the whole year. 5 people. That might even be the same family. Okay.
Huh. Yeah, it's just, I was going to say, it's at least a group of friends that got caught in the same event.
You couldn't even have a football match with 5 people. Right?
Yeah. It sounds like a failure, honestly.
You would have to play headers and volleys or something. You'd have to play like one goal. So, so that has made it more desirable for people to attempt to cross because they can't be sent back.
I see.
Okay.
I see.
So that's one thing. Another thing is they closed off. Basically, the UK is trying to create this environment where if you want asylum in the UK, you have to apply outside of the UK. And if you're granted asylum, then you can make the trip. So they have actually closed off the actual safe routes, the plane routes and everything else.
I see.
Therefore, what happens is that people have to use these alternative routes. They have to go to these gangs to get across. They can't jump on a plane as they used to be able to.
I was going to say, yeah, you could probably in the old days just get on a bus or a train or some
get on the ferry, get on the plane.
Way, right? Yeah.
Right. But you know what happens? I mean, I think this dehumanizes people because people that came on planes, if someone's on a plane, I think that the sort of the Brexity crowd would be more likely to see them as human beings. I think when people are sort of coming over on dinghies, it dehumanizes them, right? It makes you look really, really like, it's really sad. So those people died. And in the newspaper comments and on social media, some people were laughing. Some people were happy that human beings died. And that's that's the level that all of this has got us at now.
That's the worst. That's the absolute worst. No, and that's on the internet, you often see, I think, some of the worst of humanity. And I suppose you could probably find some of the best of it if you looked hard enough. But,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, some of the way people even sort of revel in seeing images of dead people and immigrants and stuff. I mean, there's really some terrible stuff out there. No, but yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating story. You know, it's last week I had a guest on from Canada, and he was telling me about these residential schools. And this actually ties into our previous conversation about how, you know, these were schools set up to basically take these sort of indigenous people who were living their lives peacefully be like, hey, look, here's this great new economic system. By the way, you have a job at the bottom end of it, and you're stuck there for life. And then, like, literally, we're gonna, like, this education we're providing you is half a job and half just vocational, so you can do your job better. And then, literally, now they're finding graves of hundreds and hundreds of, like, at this point, thousands of people who died in this. And obviously, again, like, a lot of what you're talking about, the sort of process of dehumanizing people, we've seen that. Like, the US is way worse in some ways, but it's a terrible sign, actually, that mentality seems to be spreading, and it's almost like a very almost American view of people. And obviously you guys had, via colonialism and stuff, you had your own issues, but this is almost a kind of weirdly American, I always felt like on the other hand, English folks tended to be, once you were in England and you quote unquote like made it there, it was almost promoted. It was like, oh, you're this sort of assimilated.
Oh yeah, do you know what?
Right.
Actually, yeah. I mean, I get that. I get
a good segue.
Actually, it's on a day-to-day social basis. It's much better here than it is in America. Definitely.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's as we've seen here, there's such a thing as backsliding, and from what you're describing, it's sadly, it can happen to anyone, right? And
these are things that are happening at the highest level of government. This is the rhetoric being passed down by the highest level of government. The highest level of government is basically right now saying, if somebody gets in a dinghy in France and tries to come to the UK, okay, what should happen is you should help them, first of all, not drown, okay?
Right, yeah.
And then once they're safe, you can say, okay, who are you? What are you? What are your papers? You could do all that legal stuff. But they're talking about getting the Navy involved to force them to go back to France. And it's like basically like the bullies in the school park, okay?
Exactly.
And when your highest level of government is doing that, that filters down, and it empowers people to be, and like we said, we said it right at the beginning, we said this is the laziest form of government, this is the laziest form of politics, is to create a demon, to demonize someone, and then say, I'm the one that's going to sort it out.
Yeah.
So funnily enough, our government is so incompetent that it is the exact opposite, and now we have record numbers of refugees now that we've never had because of Brexit, because they came up with this disease that didn't exist, okay, and then they came up with a cure for the disease that just made that symptom worse, and then they delivered that cure that has now made it worse,
and then they complain about it like professionally.
But
and just going back, I want to highlight something. You were along the lines of what you were just saying. We were talking about the sort of dirty underbelly of the internet and all that. What does that government position that you were talking about at the upper echelons, what does that translate down to for those little bullies on the internet who want to revel in images of dead people, right? It says, not only can I joke about this on the internet with my friends, but I actually have a degree of support from the upper echelons of my government that's saying I should have this.
It's justified in the same way that Trump justifies absolute bloody lunatics in the US. This stuff is justifying lunatics over here as well, and it's making it mainstream, and that's why we're getting balance from lunatics. Like a BBC show will be debating, and there'll be politicians, and they'll have one guy that comes up and he talks nonsense, but it's balance, and all of this stuff is normalized because that's how you get votes. Because it's really easy to get votes through hate. It's really easy to make people hate someone and then say you're going to do something about them. That's a really easy way to get votes. And so, now we don't have the employees that we need. And even Brexit, really seriously Brexiteer people are complaining that we don't have the employees. And they're like, well, let's give them temporary visas. Let's give them like 6-month visas. And all the truck drivers in Europe are laughing, saying, why should I come for 6 months? And the thing is that you have now radicalized those people that you are victimizing. Mm-hmm. Because when you go to Europe and like there's sometimes they'll go and they'll put a mic in front of a German, it's not a German, but like a Romanian truck driver in Germany, okay? And they'll put a mic in his face and they'll say, oh, the UK is giving you free visas for 6 months. Do you want to go? He says, if I go, I will be helping the people that have been demonizing me for so long. Why should I do that? Why should I give them the satisfaction of having their cake and eating it?
Exactly. No, it doesn't.
Because they have enough self-esteem. You know, they have more self-esteem than the idiots that are demonizing them. You know, and this stuff is becoming mainstream. It's becoming horrible. It's becoming normal to talk along these lines. And it's all because of sort of the political machine, the political industrial machine that needs to keep going. Because as I said, there were other parties that were coming in at the time, UKIP, etc., that were talking about these things. So the British right-sided party had to adopt these things and move further to the right to not let those even more right parties gain ground. But this is where we are now. And you literally have to be a sociopath to get a role in the British government right now. Like the whole cabinet, if you're not a Brexiteer, if you didn't blindly follow Brexit, you're not a Tory MP right now. They basically kicked out everybody that even questioned it. Now, here's the problem. This is the problem that we had throughout that process. The other parties were trying to say, can we read the agreement, please? Can we see what it is? Can we see what you're signing? No, you're just trying to destroy Brexit by reading. Literally,
with
that's
your
what they
documents,
said.
with your paperwork.
This is.
How are you going to have laws without it? But okay.
It sounds like I'm making it up and it's a joke. This is actually what happened. Okay, when Jeremy Corbyn said, "We don't want to sign off on your Brexit agreement until we read it. Can we read it, please?" And Boris Johnson said, "That's just dither and delay. You're just trying to thwart Brexit.
Read.
We
got a reader over here.
You're trying to come against the will of the people by reading. You don't need to do reading."
Read.
Then, now that they've passed it, and it's so shit, and it's breaking things, and it's breaking the UK apart. And right now there is a border, not a hard border, but there's a border between the Northern Ireland and Great Britain. There is a border through the UK. Can you imagine? Do you know of any country that voluntarily split itself in two with a border? Right?
No,
so
that's
now they've done that, okay? And now they're going, oh, maybe we should have read it.
Oh my God.
This is not the next plot of Blackadder series that's coming out. This is actually what's happening.
That's amazing. Maybe we should have read it. Turns out that giant document might have been worth reading before
Maybe.
Oh my God. I mean, amazing. Now, thank you so much, Deniz, for coming on and talking about this with us. It's a fascinating subject, I think, because it's like the same undercurrent that's like taking all of our legs out from underneath us, you know, in the realm of politics. And it's the same dolts who kind of make the same mistakes, but like we were saying sort of before we were recorded, like they all have their own masks and they all point to their own sort of unique enemies that they can sort of blame things on, and but it's the same playbook, right? It
is the same playbook, and so it's all like it's the same people. It's all the Steve Bannons and the Cambridge Analytica and everything, and it's the same.
Roger Stone.
And they've come up with a system to do all of this stuff, and they're just copy and pasting, and they're trying to take it to Italy, and we've got similar systems. We've already got similar things in like Hungary and Philippines,
Poland,
all of that stuff happening.
Belarus.
So I mean,
it's the present that we can keep listing.
It's very, and it seems weird and it seems like a conspiracy theory, but actually, this stuff travels very well. To be honest, I remember seeing a book in Antalya on the south coast of Turkey called "The Evolution Delusion." It was obviously a reply to the Dawkins book, right? And it was by a guy called Harun Yahya, who later turned out to be somebody completely different. But so they were giving it out for free, and I picked it up. I read it, and I thought it was ridiculous. But the important thing is that later on thanks to the internet, I found a book published by American evangelicals in Louisiana, or something, which was the identical book.
Oh, there it is. There it
so
is.
On the one hand, you've got like the Fethullah lot over in Turkey doing that, okay? And over in America, you've got, and it's franchising. They're franchising rhetoric. And so that's the same regarding MAGA and Brexit. These are all preconceived, systematic, and franchised. It's like opening a Starbucks.
That's a good point, a good way to leave off, because it's thought provoking, but it's also quite depressing. Now, quickly, Deniz. So Deniz Opal, and I'll have your info here and everything. Now, how to follow you on Twitter, but plug yourself a little. Like, you've got a fantastic project that's just been released.
Yes. So right now, what I'm doing is, so I've done a bunch of things, but right now what I'm doing is I'm building mobile apps, mobile games that are fun, but also that are esports. Okay, so in the same way that people develop their skills in all of these other esports games, or the football games, or the shooting games, etc., I'm trying to bring that mentality to people that just sit in their front room with their mobile phone. And you can develop your skills in a game. There are probably mobile games that you're good at. And it should be that you can compete in a competition and make money. Why not?
Right.
Why not? And so what I'm trying to do with these games is I'm trying to spread that esports mentality and that
ethos,
the competitiveness of it, and the earning aspect of it around. So one game that we've released just recently, and it's on soft launch, but I guess by the time people start watching this, it's going to start picking up and we're going to start advertising. But it's on soft launch, so you can only play it with virtual money right now. But it's called Bubbled Duel, and we'll put it in the tweets as well. Yeah. It's a really fun game. People that are downloading it are playing it on average 28 times a day, which is amazing. Like, we've been working on this for 6 months now. We made the game in partnership with a company called Ravel in Poland. So on the one hand, we're making games like that, and I'll be in Vegas in January for CES, and I'll be talking to other game developers and trying to see if I can get people that want to adapt their game to this kind of esports mentality, because I think it's fun. Because to be honest, I'm not really a mobile gamer myself, but once you put that competition into it, and the game becomes a conduit for competition, and if it's a game like Bubble is a game where you can develop your own strategy, you can change the way you play the game to try to maximize your points. That's fun. I like that. It's like playing chess. You know, it's actually challenging when you're locking horns with someone. So that's why I'm in this now. I'm enjoying it, and hopefully we'll have more games throughout the year as well. And hopefully we'll have some really cool music in the games as well, Sinan.
Yeah, definitely. And so check it out. Like, I got some info down there.
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And I thought that it was going to be more like an exam, but
no. We like to keep things informal, you know. Right. I like to be able to call Macron a turd on air occasionally, you know what I mean?
We made fun of everyone. All the right-wing governments around the world are going to be.
I think we checked off all of our vibes. It was good. It was a good time. Thank you so much, Deniz. And I really hope we'll have you back. There's a lot of big Brexit news coming in January, for example. I don't know if you...
Well, I mean, we can talk about other things as well if you like.
Yeah, by all means. You could become our tech guy. I mean, you've got so many expertise, economics. I mean, yeah, I could have you on for a lot of different things. So, you know, whenever you're inspired, please, you're always welcome.
Cool. Okay.
Thanks.
See you, dude. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. See you next time.
By all means. Thank you very much, Deniz. It was an honor to have you on. And I hope to have you on again soon. It sounds like that might be a possibility. There's supposedly some big news regarding Brexit coming up at some point in January, so I do hope to have him back on to talk about that stuff. Very informed. But so yeah, that's it for my sort of take on the news this week. My global news review. Next up, I suppose I got to do my power rankings for the U.S. media talking points, so that you guys don't have to watch that stuff. And so, first of all, we're gonna start with our number 5 in our power rankings, and this week it's the United States Senate, which they've been in there in the past, but not last week. So this isn't they're not up or down from last week, and that's the case a lot with this week's stories. The Build Back Better plan, it turns out, will not be passed by Christmas. And I hate to do it, and I told you so, but when Democrats decoupled the Build Back Better plan from the infrastructure bill, which I mentioned in a previous episode as well, they basically doomed this plan. And I worried this was the case. It seems to be so. They're never going to get this thing passed. Democrats are going to shoot themselves in the foot. And what's extremely relevant here is that in the midst of inflation, which is a fairly common talking point, next up in the power rankings, in fact, in regards to that, so this child tax credit, which folks have been getting now for quite a few months, is off the table, and people will stop getting it in January. So with prices rising because of inflation and all the troubles that come with that, oil prices going up, thank you Saudi Arabia. What you're also seeing is people getting less money in their because of this sort of tax credit being taken off the table in their bank accounts. So I can't see that helping with inflation, but anyway, right? They touted cutting child poverty in half, and so now they get to tout doubling it again, I guess. Anyway, next up, inflation, which forecasts, job numbers, like for whatever reason, it's staying in the news, and I mean, I guess the main reason being that it's still a problem. It is up from number 5 last week. So it's not only staying in the news, but it's actually kind of more in the news, in part because there's no school shootings to talk about, and heaven forbid they stay on the topic of the last one, right? But anyway, next up, number 3, Donald Trump. Specifically, again, all the court proceedings. In this case, Mark Meadows, who was his kind of personal rep, has been or they're trying to indict him. They're trying to bring him in for criminal or sort of contempt of the court, because he's trying to invoke privileges that he doesn't have anymore, since the dude is no longer in the job that he used to be in when he gave him those privileges. So more court stuff relating to Trump and the January 6th insurrection. We'll see if any of it pans out. Already they're saying that he probably won't be held in contempt of the court by the Department of Justice, because it's a bit of a stretch. I mean, we'll see. Number 2, the weather, climate. And, much like school shootings, it's sort of a one-hit wonder. It probably won't stay in the news much unless something else similar happens next week. But in this case, tragic, tornadoes hit Kentucky. And, supposedly they say it's harder to link tornadoes to climate change, because there's always a sort of consistent number of them. Although there have been stronger ones in recent years, and obviously there seem to be clear links to climate change, insofar as, just for an example, they are linking the huge tornadoes that hit Kentucky this week to warmer weather. So I don't see how it wouldn't link to climate change in the big picture, but somehow they don't quite put the two together. I'm going to go ahead and make the connection myself, pseudo-scientifically, but only insofar as they're definitively linking these tornadoes to warmer weather. So I find it hard to believe that the connection could be made, and it is made by many. Although I guess it's more deniers who put their feet in the sand and dig in to make sure that connection isn't made somehow. I don't know how they define, or how they manage to defy the connection. Anyhow, lastly, our number one topic this week in the power rankings, up from number 3 last week, is COVID. Of course, it's up from last week because last week Omicron was theoretical. It could be coming to our shores. Now it's here, and it's here in mass numbers. It's already being tipped to be the prevalent variant soon, because it spreads much faster. Although again, still looking to be less virulent. So Anyone who's been boosted has not died yet. Some folks who were double vaxxed have had issues, but again, I think it's the same sort of underlying issues that are generally in the most danger. That said, clearly there's a benefit to getting your 2 shots and a booster shot. No one's died yet from Omicron with that combination of defense. So, keep getting more shots. I know it's annoying, but that's just how it is. And that's it for our power rankings this week. As far as the weird of the week, there are so many tales for us this week. This week, there's a fantastic writer / person by the name of Alec Karakatsanis, who has been highlighting the extent to which crime numbers are going down all across the country, but B, the media is hyper-focusing on crime as this sort of pervasive underlying problem that's getting bigger and worse, despite, again, stats and numbers showing the opposite. So my weird of the week is, the culprit is the press, seem to be blowing nothing out of proportion into something, or, making mountains out of molehills, as you will. So yeah, that's my weird of the week, the press, who seem to not be content with all the things they can already get us scared about, which are real, and they need to divert us with some fake stuff. On that note, goodbye, everyone. Follow us on Twitter at LateStageTrib. Follow myself, of course, at Sir_Writes_a lot. I am Sinan Schwarting. Happy to have you folks check in on us every week and get all the latest news stories from around the world that the media is not focused on enough. And of course, one more time, thank you to Deniz Opal. Follow him at Salvador. And see you around next episode, folks. Peace out.